Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another webinar. And so today we are going to get started here, and we are going to have a continuation of our webinar series between Capacity Building International and Teams. And today we're going to be discussing the international models of emergency management, and with Italy being represented for this month's webinar. And we are going to have myself, of course. My name is Kyle King, Managing Director of Capacity Building International, and we have Harold here from Teams, and then also we are joined by Giovanni from Italian Civil Protection. And so what we're going to cover really briefly, I'll just do a couple of opening remarks about some of the activities we have going on with Teams, and then I'll turn it over to Harold, and then finally over to our presenter today and the panel for the Italian Civil Protection System. So just a reminder again, if you're new and you haven't joined us in the past, this is a monthly webinar series. We're doing these monthly now as opposed to last year when we were doing these every couple of weeks. And we have opted for different forms of content as well in terms of bringing different topics and issues and conversations into the emergency management community. So we have this monthly webinar series, but then we also have a bi-weekly podcast on crisis, conflict, emergency management. And also don't forget, there's still an annual conference coming up this year, and that's going to be 2022 annual conference. That's going to be coming out here shortly with more information. It's through the planning phases at the moment, but I just want to keep that in front of you so that you have that in mind, so that you are aware that there will be a conference with Teams coming up. And then, of course, we are starting a new Teams community as well, in case you want to stay in touch on a daily basis with other members from the organization. So just really quick about the crisis, conflict, emergency management. So we have the podcast that's come out that's just started. You might remember Dr. Lucy Easthope, who joined us last year on a webinar. She joined us there, and also Jim Wilson, who was from Medical Intelligence, M2 Medical Intelligence. He's coming up in a series pretty soon this month, or next month, I should say. And then also we have a newsletter that's going out around in terms of giving some additional information, insights, opportunities to the emergency management community. Feel free to find all of that on your regular podcast networks or on LinkedIn itself. And of course, we have a Teams community that we're building out as well. And so that's really just beginning. So it's just getting started. But in case you want to be able to connect with other members of the Teams community, whether they might be in Italy itself or in India or China or anywhere else, this is a great place to do it, to stay connected. And of course, you see on the right-hand side there, my post. I put a lot of things in the community today, so that's why it's all sort of me there in terms of calls for papers, events, conferences, and things like that. So if you need the link for that, certainly just send me a chat here or message, and I'll certainly send you the link so you can join that as well. You must be, of course, a Teams member to be able to join. And now, just to kick off, we've had 2022, and we started our webinar series here that I mentioned. And so in January, we had a kickoff session. In February, Spain, and this is Italy. April, we're still working through our different contacts to be able to find somebody for Italy. And so we're going to be coming up with a new announcement here shortly in terms of who's going to be presenting then. But I wanted to stop very briefly because, you know, we're all influenced to a certain degree by what's been happening in Ukraine and the conflict that started, I think it was just about 1 month ago now. And for me specifically, I was actually working in Ukraine for a couple of years, and I left about 4 to 5 days before the conflict started because the U.S. withdrew all personnel out of Ukraine. And so that is where Teams has started to provide some support to Ukraine. And also this is something really interesting because Giovanni was mentioning some of the support that they're providing to Ukraine, which I hope we get into as well. But I wanted to give a quick overview, and Harold will follow up with this in terms of some additional remarks, but a quick overview of what we're looking at in terms of Ukraine. This is the latest sort of humanitarian issues and snapshot coming out of OCHA. And some of the remarkable numbers that we're seeing in terms of the conflict is 6.5 million people that are being displaced throughout Ukraine itself. And of course, 3.6 million of those people who have been displaced have crossed international borders to neighboring countries since the 24th. Yeah, exactly 1 month ago, since the conflict actually started. And I'm more familiar with sort of the NATO and international baselines and resilience baselines. But, you know, when we talk about NATO and baselines, there's what we typically have of a 2% of your population movement as a baseline that nations need to be able to handle. Well, if you have smaller nations like let's say Moldova, and you're getting 371,000 people, you know, that strains the systems. That's very difficult to deal with and contend with. Not only is the conflict extremely difficult, but the pressure that's being applied on the surrounding countries as well. So that's something that is a growing, and it's going to continue to grow in terms of a humanitarian catastrophe. And that's one of the reasons why we have reached out, because I was in Ukraine, because I talked to Harold, and there's an interest of Teams that we have actually started to support Ukraine itself. And so Teams is supporting Ukraine. We recently, as an organization, signed a memorandum of understanding with Health of the Ukraine People Foundation. That's basically categorizing different levels of support as a general MOU, which means we're providing virtual expertise and support in an especially difficult, challenging environment around the topic of emergency management and disaster management. And of course, one of the things that we're looking at in terms of a project is developing an incident management system specifically for the healthcare facilities, for logistics and resource capabilities. As you can imagine, as you've probably heard, there's just thousands and thousands of tons of humanitarian aid going into Ukraine, and then how that's disseminated with logistics behind that. The WHO and UNHCR are there and working in sort of distribution and logistics networks. But once we look at the healthcare facilities, there's sort of a lack of an incident management system within the healthcare facilities themselves in terms of support with doctors and logistics, and also patient care, treatment options, et cetera. So we're developing a system, and that's being supported by Amazon, and which is Amazon Web Services. And one of the things that is critically important there is the information security aspect. And so that any information is not going to be used against the Ukrainian people or anything else like that might become a threat for them. So Amazon is supporting, and of course Teams in partnership with the foundation. And this is going to integrate with UNOCHA and WHO efforts on the ground. I'm part of the health cluster there, and for the humanitarian assistance programs that are currently in place. And the pilot program we're looking at launching in April 2022, and starting with 10 healthcare facilities in the specific region of Ukraine, and then growth to include additional assistance, may include also Teams workshops, the use of Teams experts, and of course, any type of the opportunity for Teams and the HOUP Foundation, or the foundation in Ukraine itself, to put together applications for grants and things like that to be able to enhance their capabilities to support the civilian population. And the humanitarian assistance inside Ukraine is something we'll be looking at as well. So this is something relatively new. This is what's happening now in terms of the day-to-day negotiations and development in very, very challenging times. It's very challenging in terms of, I think, at last count that I heard, about 104 hospitals have been targeted during the start of the conflict. So it's an ever-changing and evolving environment, and that's something that we are actively trying to assist with. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Harold for some additional remarks. Harold, over to you.
Thank you, Kyle, and hello, everybody listening in. I looked at those listening in. There was a lot of people from Italy, our friends in Italy. And as I told Giovanni at the little opening we had here, we also, Teams have a chapter in Italy, as we have in 16 other countries. And I also saw that Simona Cavallini, who is the president, she is listening in, and I believe that Giovanni and Simona have to get in contact after today. So I hope that we can stretch more out also to the civil protection. I also like to address a little bit, follow up on what Kyle said about Ukraine. I know he knows Ukraine much better than me, but Teams had our annual conference in Ukraine, in Kyiv, actually in 2017. So we have a lot of good friends in Ukraine. And I also had the opportunity to be in Kharkiv before that, and knowing that Kharkiv now is mostly in ruins, it's terrible to know. And Teams fully support Ukraine, and we hope that this terrible war is going to end some way. You know, Norway, we are a little country, we are a member of NATO, and actually the General Secretary of NATO is the former Prime Minister in Norway, Jens Stoltenberg, and I was happy to know that he today actually prolonged his stay for 1 more year. Actually, he has taken on a new job in Norway as the top bankman of the Norwegian bank. But as he had to prolong his stay with NATO, which is supported fully, he actually resigned from that job. And I think that was a wise decision. Norway have a small border with Russia, and there has always been, as reported, a good relationship between Norwegian and Russians up in the north in Kirkenes. And we tried, as I understand, also to keep up that relationship with the Russian people up there. Unfortunately, the news report that the mayor and people leaders on the other side showed up with the SETA on their breast and really took the stand for Putin. So I don't think that's actually possible now. It's a pity, but we live in different times. And I actually want you, Giovanni, if is possible, to address a little bit how does this war affect Italy and the civil protection? Do you prepare differently now? Because if this escalates, we do see a different situation in Europe. I was born during World War II. And I've lived in a time where everything has gone upwards. It's been a fantastic development. And I did not believe that this should happen in my lifetime. With that, I really look forward to listen to you, Giovanni. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kyle. Thank you very much, Harald, for the presentation. I'll do my best to try to share what we are doing in Italy and how we are structuring our system, and what are also the consequences of this conflict that, of course, is not affecting directly us for the time being, but certainly it has some consequence on the way we work. Knowing that there are a few Italians listening, most probably some of the things I will say will not sound new to most of them, but it's always useful to repeat. As you probably know, Italy is a disaster-prone country. Despite the fact that the 70% of our territory is a very high seismic risk, we have 10 volcanoes, 2 active and 8 quiescent, in addition to several other submarine volcanoes. Then we have over the 80% of the Italian territory, which has high hydraulic and hydrogeological risk. So most of the municipalities of our territory on our territory are affected by hydrogeological risk. During summer time mostly, but also during winter time in some region of our country, we have a very high forest fire risk. And that's something that, as Harald was saying, you were discussing yesterday with some Italian colleagues in another meeting. So I'm sure you are familiar with that. And at the same time, having so long coast and so high seismic risk on our territory, we also have a very high risk of tsunamis. Just to give you an example, in 2003, we had a tsunami of over 10, with waves over 10 meter high on the island of Volcano, called Volcano Island, which is a small island in the southern part of the country. It's a very touristic area. We were very lucky that in that case, the tsunami arrived on the 30th of December, so nobody was on the beach. But that's certainly one of the issues that we have to deal with. We have to be prepared to deal with it. Then, due to climate change, we are witnessing an increasing risk of droughts, not only in the southern part of the country, but also in the northern part of the country. In the last days, for example, we have recorded a very low level in the rivers on the northern part of Italy, which most probably will bring to problems of droughts in the coming months. So in addition to the so-called natural risk, we also natural hazard, we also have a number of other risks that have very little to do with natural hazards. And for example, we have more than 1,000 industrial plants at significant risk on our territory. And we also have nuclear risk, not only, despite the fact that Italy does not have any more nuclear power plant, we are we have to deal with the remain of the nuclear power plant we used to have in the past, and all our neighbors are adding, and that they manage nuclear power plants. So that's also another risk we have to be prepared for. Having said that, it means that we have, like, when we make these presentations, we say that Italy is like a big risk shopping mall. You can have whatever you can think of. And then, as you all know, Italians are full of fantasy, and they do sometimes they have special ideas. As you can see from the picture on the bottom of the screen, this is absolutely one of the worst emergencies we had in recent years due to man-made no discussion emergency we had to deal with, which was Costa Concordia. Another type of emergency we have to deal with is this, let's say, lack of control on the land use in the last decades. I don't know if you are familiar with this small mountain that I'm showing now on the screen, but this small mountain is the Vesuvius volcano. And Vesuvius is an active volcano. It is still active, and our scientists are telling us that sooner or later something will happen at the Vesuvius. And the last eruption of Vesuvius was 1944, during the Second World Conflict. And as you can see from the picture I'm showing you now, this is the same picture, more or less, taken in 1944 at the time of the last eruption, and in 2006. As you can see, we as Italian authorities, we have allowed to build illegal houses in the red zone near to the main crater of Vesuvius, in an area that, according to our planning and our plans, will be certainly covered by ashes. That's the best case scenario in case of the reference event that we are expecting for Vesuvius. And this, I'm showing you this just to say that we have probably lacked of controlling what was happening in area at risk, and now we have to deal with, let's say, the heritage of our lack of control of the land use. This is, let's say, the picture of what is how our territory looks like and how our risk profile is today. But we have been always, we were aware of this situation. We had to learn very soon how to deal with the natural and man-made disaster on our territory. As I said, having so many hazards, we had to create systems able to at least manage the emergencies. As I said, and as I showed you from the last slide, probably we are not good. We were certainly not good enough in prevention activities. But and that's, we still have a long way ahead in front of us to improve our capacity to prevent, to work on prevention. But in the last century, we have been working a lot on building systems able to manage emergencies, at least, and to recover after the emergencies. Just to show you few of the events that affected our territory in the last 120 years. This is just a listing, and I will just focus on some of those. For example, the 1908 earthquake of Messina Strait. This is why I'm mentioning this earthquake, which was a 7.1 earthquake, is because our scientists are telling us that something similar may happen again in Messina. And that's why that's one of the big ones we are planning for, to manage this kind of a potential strong earthquake between Sicily and Calabria. And we are working on the planning, and just to give you an example, the same thing that happened on the Vesuvius happened also in the area of Messina and Calabria. A lot of houses not respecting building codes were allowed to be built in that area. And this is something that goes much beyond the capacities of any possible disaster management or civil protection system. That has something to do with how the administration is managed in our territory. And however, as I said, we have built a system to handle emergencies, which will never be able to work on building codes, for example, in Sicily and Calabria, to be prepared for next emergencies on the Strait of Messina. Just very quickly, in the overview of other emergencies we had to deal at national level in the last century, just to mention some. The 1966 Arno River flooding in the city of Florence. This was particularly important for our country for a number of reasons. We have learned in this emergency, for example, the importance of volunteers. In Italy, we have always had a very strong tradition of volunteerism. And however, in that particular case, we have learned that we needed to do something to organize those volunteers. After the flooding of Arno River, there were they were called on the newspaper at the time the mud angels. So volunteers coming to Florence, not only from Italy, but also from everywhere in the world, to support the local authorities and local population to deal with the consequence of the disaster. This was due mostly because Florence is a city full of cultural heritage and globally known for the beauty of the city. So this acted as a pulling factor for volunteers to come without any organization, just coming there to support. Since then, we have understood the enormous potential of volunteers, but at the same time, the importance of organizing those volunteers. And that's why we built since then a system that today allows us to have on our territory over 800,000 registered volunteers willing to support us in case of emergencies. And this is a crucial element in our response system, especially since it was decided to abolish the mandatory military service for the young people in Italy. So we have lost the availability of a high number of soldiers that could help us providing manpower, but we have replaced them in several cases with volunteers. Another very important element of the lessons we have identified, we have learned after the Arno River flooding of '66 was the importance of protecting our cultural heritage. As I said, Florence is a city rich of cultural heritage, which is important not only for cultural reasons, but mostly because it's also the main source of income of an entire region, of Tuscany region. So we have learned the importance of safeguarding our cultural heritage, hopefully preventing the effect of disaster, if not to be ready to deal specifically with cultural heritage since the beginning of the response operations. After that, after 66, we had a number of other important earthquakes affecting our territory. And what is important, what was extremely important of the one I listed on the screen is because we had in 12 years, we had 3 strong earthquakes affecting the entire country from deep south to deep north. And it's important the timing of those events, because in 12 years, the people still had the memory of previous events. And this created a very important change in the public opinion on the importance of creating or reshaping the response system, because the people still remember the previous, they could compare the different management of the emergencies after the different national, those earthquakes that became national emergencies. And this brought us to deeply modify our system. In 1980, after the earthquake of Irpinia, which is nearby Naples, is an area nearby Naples in the southern part of the country, while we had more than 3,000 victims. And what came out in a very clear way in that case, it was that 3 days after that the emergencies, there were areas that had not been reached by rescuers 72 hours after the main shock. There were enough capacity, but what was completely lacking was the coordination of those capacities. There were areas that were flooded by support teams and other areas that were not even reached by rescuers. This created a great shock in the public opinion, and there was a decision to change the reference law managing disaster management in Italy. And in 1982, the National Civil Protection Department, which is the organization where I'm working, was created exactly with a specific objective of coordinating the response of the entire national system in case of major disaster. Since 1982, there had been a number of laws regulating different aspects of our work. The most relevant was in 1982, where the foundation of how the system is structured were written, were developed. Okay, all those laws were finally unified in what we call today the Italian Civil Protection Code that was published in 2018, which contains all main acts related to civil protection in Italy. And of course, everything starts from the mandate. Now I'm just pulling out of the law of 2018 the main important elements. Okay, the mandate is a very broad mandate, and I think it's common to several disaster management organizations around the world, but it's very, very broad, because it's the safeguard of human life, health, goods, cultural heritage, settlements, animals, and environment from both natural and man-made disasters. So it's enormous, the mandate. Being all of you professionals, you would understand immediately how broad is and how complex is this mandate. One of the characteristics of our civil protection system is that we are covering the entire emergency cycle. It's slightly different from the way we are normally used to show at international level the disaster risk management cycle, because we focus mostly on what we call the real time. We are working, of course, in prevention, but only in one part of the prevention activities. We are working on preparedness. We work a lot on forecasting, nowcasting, and early warning, of course. And then we have been mandated, of course, the most visible aspect of our work is coordinating the relief activities, and we also work on recovery. I use the word we because, as I said before, the Italian Civil Protection Department is only a coordination body of a system which is composed of many other actors. According to the law, the civil protection in Italy is not one organization, but it's a function that is carried out by a system of organizations. And basically, all organizations that have a task in protecting in civil protection in our territory. So basically, our system is composed by the national government, all different ministries, all different regions, the provinces, the municipalities, and all operational structure belonging to the states or to public institutions. To give you an example, the National Fire Brigade, or the Italian Army, or the police forces, all of them are part of the Italian civil protection system. The law, and this is one of the characteristics of our system, is that the law says that also the scientific and academic community is part of the civil protection system, national system. And I will tell you a few words later on how this happened, how we managed to have the scientific and academic community within our system. And another very important pillar of our system is the civil society at two levels. The volunteers, as I said before, and also all private companies that are handling public services. Just think to telecommunication companies or the railway company. All of them are considered as part of the system. Now, how do we make all this complex system working? If we look at the organigram at the national level, the system is structured in this way. My department, the Italian Civil Protection Department, belongs to the Prime Minister's office. It's one of the offices of the Prime Minister. So we are, in a way, above the other ministries. We work, of course, together with all the ministries, the one that you see listed in yellow, and with all the local authorities that are highlighted in green on the screen. Each of the ministry or the local authorities is overseeing the so-called operational components of the system. If I take an example, if I take the Ministry of Health, for example, they oversee to the medical emergency services, which in Italy are organized at the regional level, for example. But these are under the, let's say, everything is coordinated under the Ministry of Health and the regions. So this is the organigram, how it's in theory organized at the national level. However, not all emergencies are national emergencies. In fact, our system is structured based on the principle of subsidiarity. And the law identify three levels of emergencies: A, B, and C. The emergency, the type A emergency is the emergency that can be, has to be dealt at the local level. So at the level of the municipality. It means that at the local level, the mayor will have the political responsibility and operational responsibility of handling this emergency with the resources present at the local level. For example, the technical offices of the municipalities. Of course, this will be done in coordination and together with the national operational components that are present on the local at the local level. Just to give you an example, in Italy, mostly the fire brigade the firefighting activities are managed by the National Fire Brigade. The National Fire Brigade have local offices, local branches in the most relevant municipalities. Those local branches will work together with the mayor to manage the emergencies at the local level. This is for the A-type emergencies. If we go to the higher level, it's the B-type emergency, which is an emergency which can be dealt or should be dealt either at provincial or regional level. And this happens when either the affected area is larger than the territory of one municipality, or if it's too serious, the emergency, to be dealt by a single mayor. And this brings to, let's say, we go at the higher administrative level to manage the emergency, which normally is the regional level. It's the governor of the region, which will coordinate with all the resources available at the provincial or regional level, and with all the national components present at the regional level. In those two cases, my department will not intervene unless it's requested to intervene by the authority in charge. We will just monitor the situation and we will facilitate the delivery of assistance by the different components of the system. And of course, very often, the government will also pay the cost at the end of the emergency, will reimburse the different expenses that are, at least part of those expenses that are done during the emergency management. And now we arrive to the C-type emergency, which is the national or international emergency. This is the emergency where we have a declaration of a state of emergency at the national level. In that case, there is a declaration of state of emergency which gives to the head of the department, of the national department, the coordination of the entire operation. And this is what is happening for earthquakes, for example, for volcanic eruptions, or for emergencies like the one of Ukraine, which is considered a C-type emergency for international operation, and also national, but mostly international operation for the time being. In that case, the head of the department is given two main powers with the declaration of state of emergency. The first one is the power to issue what we call ordinanze, orders. So we have the power to impose decision in case of need, and we can waive certain legislation to manage the emergency. The second power we have in our hands is that we receive additional financial resources to manage the emergency. And this, as you can imagine, that's very useful in case of major emergencies. How do we operationalize the system in case of national emergency? We use what we call the operational committee, the Civil Protection Operational Committee. This is our main decision body that is convened in case of emergency. It's activated immediately when we have the information, when we have the feeling that there will be a declaration of state of emergency. It's a meeting where with the characteristic that the people sitting around the table are mandated by their institution to sit at the decision-making table, which means that the decision taken around the table must be immediately operational. The representative of this basically, we will see with the following slide, people that are representing the different institutions around this table are at the very high level. Just to give you an example, we have the head of the Italian Civil Protection Department who speaks on behalf of the Prime Minister. We have the head of the fire brigade, the National Fire Brigade. We have normally the chief of staff of the Italian Armed Forces, and so on and so forth. So the people sitting around this table must have the power to engage their own organization without losing a single minute. They cannot say, I need to consult with my minister. They have to have the power to take the decision. Those people are pre-identified, and they know that they have to be in our headquarters in less than 1 hour after they are called. So we have this operational committee, which is a flexible organization, and the composition of this organization varies very according to the type of emergency we are in. And this meeting will continue, will be run 24/7 for the first days of the emergencies. And then we will, until we open a coordination office on site where the event happened. To work and to take the informed decision, this operational committee received 2 information influx. The first one is the, let's say, the information on how the situation is developing. And this happened thanks to what we call the Sala Situazione Italia, which is an operational room where we see the presence 24/7 of representatives of all main operational components of the Italian system, from the fire brigade to the armed forces to the police and the Coast Guard and so on. And this is the only place in Italy where we have full-time presence of all the operational components in the same room. And their task is basically, when we have to monitor, of course, the situation, and if something happened, they will gather information from their different operational rooms. So the police force will gather information from their people, their people on site, from their national operation center, and as they do all the other operational components. And at the end, we will build, let's say, a situational picture, putting together the information coming from all the different operational components. And this will be provided to the people sitting in the operational committee. So all of them will work based on a common situational picture, which we know in real life it's not very common. Very often each organization works based on their own information, not on a shared situational picture. At the same time, the other information flow coming to the operational committee is coming from what we call the Centro Funzionale Centrale, or let's say the technical support center that we have in our department. And this is a center that basically is the coordination hub of the regional centri funzionali. Each region has its own, or should have its own, centro funzionale technical center that basically work on forecasting and monitoring of major risk scenario. That's on the screen. You can see what we do for hydrometeorological risk, but we have the same thing for seismic risk or volcanic risk and all main risks affecting our territory. And basically their main task is to translate the technical data into information for decision making. you are professional, you know what I'm referring, but what we have learned in our experience that it's of crucial importance is to have this scientific and technical component within our organization, because based on those two information flow, the situational awareness, the technical data on the event, we are able to build scenarios to take informed decision in very short time. I have to speed up because I spoke too long. Just to go quickly to the national resources. Italy can, the Italian civil protection system can mobilize a huge number of resources. And this is also one of the reasons why Italy, when it was also struck by disaster in recent years, did not request international assistance. Because Italy has developed in the years a very high number of resources. And having so many operational components, this has allowed us to create, to have a huge number of available resources on our national territory. Just to give you an example, each region in our territory must have what we call a colonna mobile regional response unit, which is built in different ways, but respecting national guidelines on this matter. And those regional response units should be ready to go wherever is needed in very few hours. Then, of course, we have the resources belonging to the different operational components of the state, the fire brigade, the coast guard, the fire brigade, also the forest fire activities. I mentioned before the volunteers, just to say a quick one. We have learned the importance of the volunteers, and we decided in Italy that we work with organized volunteers. We know already that there will always be the so-called last-minute volunteers, but in our system, we made the choice to work mostly with organized volunteers. We build a legal framework for them. We are giving them resources to train, to equip themselves, and to insure themselves, but that's the choice. We prefer not to have to deal with individual volunteers. The volunteers, when we activate them, they are protected not only by insurance, but also we reimburse the employer that are releasing those volunteers in case of need. I skip a few slides because we are too long, just to go to the international activities. Of course, Italy is very active at the international level. The Italian civil protection is very active. At the UN level, we work, of course, we are the focal point for Sendai on disaster risk reduction. We are the coordinating body of the National Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. Of course, we are also working with WHO, mostly with the emergency medical team section of WHO. We work with UNHCR and so on. And of course, also at the European level, we are very active in the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. I don't know if all of you are familiar with it, but that's basically the coordination of over 30 civil protection authorities of 30 countries, not only the European Union, but also other countries that have requested to be part of this mechanism. We don't have time to go into that, but just for a few pictures to see that as Italian civil protection, we have been working in recent years in more or less everywhere. There were major disasters all over the world, from Iran to Mozambique to South Sudan to China, also to Russian Federation, and providing different type of support from response teams, emergency medical teams, forest fire planes, or technical expertise also, because the good thing of having a system so complex as I showed you before is that we can utilize experts, also individual experts coming from universities, and to deploy them under civil protection, just to give you an example. And I leave the last 2-3 minutes to speak about Ukraine. Okay. Regarding Ukraine, we are working both internationally and in Italy. It was decided by the Italian government to declare a state of emergency for an international emergency to support Ukraine or the neighboring country to Ukraine dealing with the influx of refugees. And on the other hand, it was decided also to declare state of emergency to deal with a potential massive influx of refugees from Ukraine on Italian territory. The Italian Civil Protection Department, my department, was given the responsibility to coordinate both of them. So now, at the international level, we have assistance to Ukraine. Unfortunately, we are not authorized to enter into Ukrainian territory. So we are now working mostly through the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, delivering assistance to Poland or Romania for further delivery on Ukraine at the border to the Ukrainian authorities. We have, just to give you a few figures, but these are changing daily. We have deployed one camp into Poland for 1,000 people. And that's to be brought into Ukraine. We have deployed to the EU hub in Romania 23 ambulances and over 25 trucks of medical equipment, which little by little is now delivered into Ukraine. At the same time, we are performing medevac flights from Poland, and we have already done over 40 medevac into Italy. And in the last 2 days, we have built one camp in Slovakia for 250 people, and one in Moldova we delivered yesterday for 500 people. So that's what we are doing at the international level. At the national level, we are also planning for massive influx of refugees. For the time being, we are still using the ordinary tools to deal with the refugees, to provide assistance to refugees. So it's the Ministry of Interior of Italy handling that. But all our regions are planning and creating contingency plans and for potential massive increase of refugees in the coming weeks. That we hope it will not happen, but we have to be ready if this will happen. So I think I spoke also too long, and I'm available to answer possible questions. Over to you, Kai.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. A very good and insightful presentation. Really appreciate that. We just had, and I think we just have a few minutes left because we are going a little bit long, but there was a question about the volunteer system, and I think that that's really interesting. So you have said that there's 800,000 volunteers. But you have organized it, or not you particularly, but the Italian system has organized it to where you're dealing with, if I understood correctly, organizations, not individual volunteers. So volunteer organizations. And you're doing that largely for sort of liability and reimbursement purposes. Could you spend just a couple of minutes explaining that? Because that's an interesting sort of relationship. Yeah. As we've seen with many disasters, you get a million volunteers, but it can be chaos. So it seems like you've learned from that experience.
That's exactly the reason why it was chosen in the past to deal with individual, not with individual, but with organized volunteers. The way we structure the system is that we have. Okay, anyone who wants to create an organization can do it. There are rules to be followed. And this organization has to be recognized either at the local level or at national level. It depends on the size of the organization. So there are some, they have to be registered with those roster of organizations. And then if you are registered, you can get funding for your activities, for example. And in case of emergency, we can activate the organization either directly or through the regional authorities. It's a bit complex to explain you how, but basically we can request an organization to provide us volunteers for a specific activity. In case this organization is providing us personnel, we will, as government or as region, we will reimburse the employer of the volunteers. So the employer will not lose the money for those, if those volunteers will serve for us. And this is, let's say, a crucial point in our system, because we have more volunteers on one hand, and then also the employer are not unhappy, let's say.
No, that's very interesting. Thanks. And the liability, I think, is a big thing as well. So that's a great point there. Okay, great. Harold, do you have any final remarks?
No, I enjoyed your presentation, Giovanni. Very instructive and also a little bit different than other organizations we have presented. So this is a good thing that we see different ways to organize, and you seem to have done it very well. And I will then see to that Simona and yourself getting good contact, so teams and civil protection will work closely together in Italy. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. And in case of need, you can write me an email. I'll try to answer if you want more information on different aspects. I'll try to answer to your request.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks again for joining our webinar series, and we will certainly have a recording and we'll post that as well so that you can watch this later on if you want to review sort of the details of the presentation and everything. And if you do have any questions or if you need any further information, certainly please let me know. You can just respond to the emails that you'll be receiving, and then you just hit reply, and then I'll get those as well, or you can reach out to Harold. And if you have any other questions or recommendations, or you'd like to see other presentations, certainly let us know as well. We'd like to be able to fulfill those requests. So thanks again, everybody, and really appreciate it. Thanks, Giovanni. Thanks for joining us.